program by, for, and about women today with Sandra Elkin.
Good evening and welcome to Woman. This is the first of two programs on the nursing profession, and I think you're going to be very surprised at what you're going to hear. With me is Dr. June Rothberg. Dr. Rothberg is Dean of the School of Nursing at Adelphi University. She is immediate past president of the American Association of Colleges of Nursing. June is a co-founder of NCAP, the Nurses Coalition for Action in Politics. Also with us is Dr. Jean Spero. Dr. Spero is Dean of the School of Nursing at the State University of New York at Buffalo. She is Chairwoman of the Board of Review of Baccalaureate and Higher Degree Programs of the National League for Nursing. My third guest is Dr. Joanne Ashley, author of Hospitals, Paternalism, and the Role of the Nurse, which is a very controversial book about the nursing profession. Dr. Ashley is an associate professor of nursing at Northern Illinois University. She is also on the board of trustees of NCAP. Welcome to all three of you.
Pleasure to be here.
Joanne, what has been the place of nursing?
Well, within the health field for a number of years now, we've had scandals, and right now they're being opened up to the public. But the greatest scandal has been that men in the health field who have been very greedy, mostly for profits and exploiting the public, and nurses have placed nurses in the position of being what I call coolies and donkeys. Now, a coolie in countries where they have well-defined caste systems is really your very lowest, your person who has the very lowest status. Now, when I use the term donkey, I mean this: nurses have been treated like little more than domestic asses. Now, the public hasn't known this because the public has been lied to for a century by, dominant persons in the health field. In its time, we told the truth.
Now, that's a very controversial statement. I think maybe June and Jean had better comment on it.
I'm ready.
Well, I hadn't really expected that, and I think there's probably some degree of truth, but I have to say that there is a fair degree of exaggeration. Nurses have not been treated as professionals. Their contribution to the health care system has not been given enough merit. But I don't think I can buy donkeys and coolies.
I didn't think you would, Jim. And that suits me fine, because nobody has to agree with me. You know that.
Well, the point is really, isn't it, that there's a broad spectrum of political thought going on within the profession now.
Yes.
And maybe Joanne is here, and you two are maybe there, or maybe one of you is somewhere in the middle. And that's really the important thing. There is a dialogue happening. What about health care and the general public's definition of health care and their attitudes toward what they can expect from our health care system? What about the definition first?
Oh. Well, I think if you're talking about the public's definition of health care, I think that's almost immediately translated into medical care, which has to do, primarily with the diagnosis of pathology. I think that within nursing, when we speak about health care, we're talking about health promotion and disease prevention.
So you would say that, well, do you think the public's definition of health care includes nursing? I mean,
No.
I hate to start messing with the terms medical care and health care, but I mean, what they're really talking about is medical care. But do you think they have included nursing to the extent to which nursing participates in their care?
Well, perhaps not to the extent that we would like them to include nursing.
Now, I'd like to interrupt here because the public doesn't know what nursing care is. Hospitals do not provide it. The most that people get in hospitals is technical nursing. Hospitals will not pay for professional nursing attention and free nurses to give it. Now, you pay for it. The public pays for it. But it's not there. Also, nursing homes. There's no professional nursing going on like nurses are taught to give nursing care.
Well, we see what we think are nurses in nursing homes, right?
Right.
But they're not.
For
No.
the most part, they're practical nurses or nurses' aides.
Or housekeepers.
Or housekeepers. The law requires that there be some minimal amount, and there needs to be somebody every 24 hours, but it doesn't specify it, and it can be so superficial as to be non-existent. And that, unfortunately, is probably the basic reason that the level of care in nursing homes today is as bad as it is, that there are very, very few or almost no professional nurses available. And the point is, it's not that the nurses are not out there to be employed, it's that most of these institutions are profit-making, and they are not willing to pay for the salaries of professional nurses.
And yet they're robbing the public. It's a system of robbery, is what I call it. Exploitation, gross.
I think, though, Joanne, you included two components in your statement. You talked about nursing homes,
Yes.
which is what June is responding to.
I'm talking about when
but
I
you also
speak.
talked about professional nursing in hospitals. And I think then, we have to deal with what your definition is.
I'm
of
talking about
professional
the
nursing.
American healthcare system, which is what the public needs to look at very carefully. It's the American medical care system. It's not healthcare. It's been disease-oriented too long. Nursing has had such a low status that nurses haven't been able to function. They hop from job to job to job because they're miserable in these institutions. That really, I see our healthcare system it's a menace to health. It's a threat to health. You're not safe, hardly, going to a doctor or a hospital. I would suggest, if you're at all able to creep around, stay home. Just stay home. You'd be safer. No, get a good nurse.
Joanne, I can't handle that. I'm sorry.
Stay healthy.
We can't sit here really and say, don't go to a doctor.
I know that. It's an absolute necessity that we correct the defects. Now, we've got to look at physicians and say, what's wrong with you people that would take out healthy organs just because you're greedy for money? Now, I call that, and I may be different, but I call that evil. I believe there is evil in people and in this country, and this country is filled with it. Now, there's something wrong with somebody. They're not healthy.
Let's talk about the relationship of physicians to nurses, and let's go back. One of the appealing things about your book was the historical information. There was lots in the book that I had never imagined was true. And let's talk about the early training of nurses first, and try to give people some idea.
The hospital schools of nursing were really established because at a time when hospitals were growing into businesses. See, in the 1800s, hospitals truly were sort of charitable, in a way. But around the 1890s or along in there, the prominent people said, in medicine, hospital administrators said, look, this is a lucrative business. Let's make hospitals into really well-run businesses. Well, they needed labor, the productive force. Nursing schools were established for, to provide labor, a source of production. Now, this has been for centuries the role of women, cheap labor, a domestic ass, June. So this has just been the truth of our history. Now, I had to look that in the face and say, look, I've been in this profession, and this healthcare system is part of my country.
All right, June and Jean, talk about what's going on today as far as nurses training, and if you can, a little bit relate it to what happened and how it's changed nursing education, I should really say, not nurses training.
Well, one of the very real contributions of Joanne's book is the fact that for many of us it documented what was real, what was happening, and many of us didn't know about it. We felt it, but we did not have any specific proof. We didn't know the references that are cited and are so clearly relevant to this. There has been a movement against the hospital school of nursing. It has gone on for many, many years, and the battles were long and bloody, and they're not over with yet. However, there has been a change. It's occurred principally since the 1940s. It's moved up with a fair degree of acceleration, where 10 years ago, the predominant number of student nurses were graduating from schools which were hospital affiliated. That is no longer the case. The graduations now are less from hospital schools of nursing, more from associate degree programs, which are 2-year junior college programs, and a very, very high rising curve of graduations from baccalaureate programs, which are 4 years in length. the merit of both of the latter types of programs, the baccalaureate and the associate degree, is that they are truly educational. They are not principally service-oriented, which is the thing that Joanne is talking about in particular.
I want to interrupt you, June.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we do encourage nurses. Nurses are well-educated people. Many of them have gone to school for 15 years because they've had to struggle.
And that wasn't always the case, was it? I mean, people did not think it was
definitely was
necessary
not.
for nurses
Right.
to be educated.
But the
Right.
point is, why educate someone when where they work are not going to recognize it? They're not going to get paid for it. They're not going to be employed. In nursing of all professions, women, our most highly educated women, are discriminated against because there's no societal force that forces hospitals to pay nurses for going to school. Now, something's wrong with the logic there. After a young woman or a young man this day and age struggles to get through school, why not, like any decent business, why not recruit the best prepared to do what they're educated to do?
Well, Joan, again, I think
Joanne.
I would have to disagree with you. You know, some of what you say I think is essentially true, but I think that there are hospitals who do pay and compensate nurses based on their education and also their experience. So I don't think it's as black and white
Well, now,
as you're
Jean,
making
listen,
it.
you know what I would tell the public, or women, or nurses? Go into any hospital and take a poll. Go into your local hospital. That's your hospital. Say, listen, how many professional nurses have you got working here?
By professional, you're
How many
talking about nurses
LPNs?
that have a baccalaureate degree and higher?
Yes, indeed.
So then are you talking about registered nurses? I'm just trying
Well,
to
they're
put
all being registered nurse means that you hold a licensure,
Yes,
which
you're
simply means
licensed.
that you have taken the qualifying examination, which certifies you for minimal safe practice. All right.
All right.
Now, I think what Joanne is doing is she is making a distinction that those of us in the nursing profession understand as part of our jargon. She is talking about professional nursing, and I asked you before, in terms of what do you mean by professional nursing?
Yes, because obviously sometimes we see women who have white uniforms on and they're not nurses, and the public sometimes thinks they are. So we must
Now,
really
this,
make that distinction.
the public is confused. Now, the RN is the same thing, really, as the MD. But in nursing, because nursing is a woman's field, everybody wears the label of RN. It means nothing. It's never meant anything. It was just something tacked on to nurses to give them a little bit of prestige one time. Legally, it meant nothing. So now we have 3 levels in nursing, and they all wear the label RN. It doesn't tell the public anything. It doesn't tell me anything. It's meaningless.
All right, so what do you mean, professional?
A professional person, the major part of their time and their work is spent in intellectual activity. They're making judgments. Now, that gets me, you may say, well, what's intellectual about nursing? Because people do. Well, let me tell you. The knowledge base in nursing
But I
is
didn't
broader.
say that.
Yeah, I know. Everybody does that I talk to. The knowledge base in nursing is broader than the knowledge base in medicine. Nurses learn, you know, the physiology, the physical sciences, the psychological, the sociological, and we also need ethics and liberal arts because humans are sort of, you know, they're spirits. They have a spirit. So nurses have to know the psychosocial factors influencing healthcare, medicine, physical sciences, biological sciences, and many of them, you know, they don't know that much about other parts of the human being because they're not educated to know. They're just beginning to move in the direction that nursing has always, you know, been going. We study the total human being. Medicine has studied the organs, if you want to really look at it that way. Now, it's strange that they know all about these organs and they'll take out healthy ones, isn't it? But a nurse would never do that to you because that's not her function. Her function is to get to know you and to use all of this knowledge that she's got in her head and try to give you human nourishment. Now, that's how I define
Nor
nursing.
is she legally licensed to take out organs.
Right.
I want to pursue this, but I want to do it another way. I want to go through the back door.
Okay.
Where did you all study nursing? Under what circumstances?
Under an apprenticeship system in a hospital school of nursing, which perceived itself as part of an overall family. And the family was the hospital and the school, and you didn't see strangers. And I, unfortunately, at this stage in my life, am old enough to remember back to that system where nurses stood back and allowed male physicians to precede them in elevators because they were higher status people. It was in my experience as a student nurse that we did the very, very daring thing. We no longer stood when a physician entered the chart room. And that was our very, very large-sized Declaration of Independence. Now, you have to understand that out in polite society, men always rose for women.
Mm-hmm.
But in this context, the whole thing was reversed. And that's a very, very good example. It's just a vignette of what the system was like.
Mm-hmm.
Physicians, hospital administrators were the power base. They were the people of high status. Nurses were wives, mothers, daughters, lovers, what have
Coolies
you.
and asses.
Hmm?
Coolies and asses.
All right,
No,
Joanne,
I didn't. No,
that's
I'm
enough
sorry.
of
I
that.
didn't perceive it that way, Joanne. And I really won't allow you to distort my memories of my original experience. And I was fairly comfortable in that. It was warm and it was supportive. And I think to a large extent we rendered at that point a relatively high level of care.
How many hours a week did you work?
About 40. But at least at my school, we were, our classes were part of that 40 hours. It was not time over and above the 40 hours of work. But I have to tell you, I rendered an awful lot of direct nursing care as an exchange for the education that I got. And I attended a relatively progressive school of nursing in which we did get a sociological base and we did get a psychological base. And I can assure you that many other hospital schools at that time did not do it.
Mm-hmm.
What was the school?
It was Lenox Hill Hospital, which no longer has a school of nursing. And although I'm sorry about it in one sense, I'm happy about it in another sense because I think nurses have to be educated in institutions of higher learning along with other people.
All right, that's one of the issues now, isn't
Yes.
it, in nursing?
A clear issue.
Yes.
Right, and that the move is toward a standardization,
Yes.
a national standardization. Is that
Well,
not
there
true?
is, I think, by
Yeah.
the professional association, and there have been position papers written to that effect.
Now, where is the opposition coming from for that move?
Well, the opposition, I think, is coming from a variety of sources. The opposition is coming from, of course, those hospital diploma schools and their representatives and the hospital administrators that are still in existence. I would suspect that there is a strong mode of opposition that's also coming from physician groups. And I am sorry to say that I think that there is some opposition from within the nursing profession itself.
And what form is that opposition taking?
Well, I think that when June was talking about, her 3-year training program, her education, and I went through a similar system, one aspect of it that is very fascinating, largely because you don't know what's happening to you when it's happening, is that you are socialized into that system. You are socialized into believing this is the way it is to be. I was thoroughly socialized into believing that I was the very best nurse that could possibly be produced, and that there was no other school in existence that was as good as the school that I was in. And much of what June said her experiences were of course mine, in terms of you stood up for certain selected people, you did not debate an issue, you were following orders, and I was thoroughly socialized into that until I went on and got myself re-socialized and re-educated. Now, I think for many nurses who have gone through that kind of an educational system, as June said, she was comfortable. I was comfortable too until I began to learn better.
I was comfortable too until I did my research and found out the truth. Now she mentioned the term socialization. Physicians, they go to school too, medical school. They are socialized to feel, to think that the nurse is there to serve them. A servant. They've got one built in. I call this that relationship between men and women in the health field, nurses and doctors. The myth, we've lived with the myth of the holy marriage between nursing and medicine. Two professions, married. We were the wife. I mean, we played that role, socialized into it. June, I don't know what year she graduated from a hospital school. I graduated in 1961. Now, that's just been a decade or so ago when you think about it. But I stood up for doctors, opened doors for them. And you see, I resent a great many forces in society that would let such a dangerous system of education survive in this country for a century. Now, education, how you educate people is very important. You know, really, nurses have lived and died not being educated to the fullest extent of their potential, and the point of it is, you see, they didn't live as a human being. When people control your life, influence your education, people who don't view you as human, listen, you're in trouble. You see, I have thought about this for a long, long time, and I just do feel very strongly it has not been fair. You see, nurses have not lived in, we haven't been treated like we lived in a democracy, you see. I call it a form of despotism that is, by the way, still very operative in the healthcare system. The American public, too, has been just as exploited as nurses.
So no matter what your political differences are, do you all agree that the fact that nurses have been somewhat oppressed has damaged our healthcare system, and the public has not gotten what they've been entitled to?
Absolutely.
Very definitely.
Now, why, is my question, why have you all not spoken up before? This situation's been going on for a long time. Don't you have some qualms about what the profession has not done?
Well, but I think you are jumping to a conclusion that is not, in actual fact. I think that the nursing profession has, done things about this. I think what we have been talking about before, and that is the movement, towards baccalaureate education for nurses and, master's preparation for nurses and even doctoral preparation for nurses. Okay, so I think that there has been some movement there. I think perhaps one of our biggest problems is that we are a politically naive group, and we have been, I think, until relatively recently.
It's true.
And
we are women.
Our attempts to deal with this issue have fallen short of what they should have been to gain the public's attention and the public's support.
But the opposition has been enormous, has it not?
Yes.
Incredible.
Yes.
And I think it's very, very similar to what's happening with the entire women's movement. And as I think back now, I think there were a number of us who became peripherally aware of what was happening in the field, and thought perhaps it was our own craziness that we were sensitive to this and resentful of it, and began to look at it in the whole perspective of men and women, and perceive what was happening, but almost took it as, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And you have to know that nurses as a group are relatively passive and very slow to action, and I think that's been part of the socialization.
But women are passive and slow to action.
That's precisely the fact. It's because they are women, predominantly, 98%. When the women's movement started its own level of activity, its own sense of consciousness raising, I think it began to awaken a number of us, and I think probably we began to look at our lifestyles and our professional or unprofessional situations, if you want to characterize them as thus, in those terms, in feminist terms, and the feminist rhetoric made sense to us. And I suppose
even though you were receptive to the women's movement, the women's movement has not been supportive of the nursing cause, has it?
And that was my greatest disappointment. I have felt very much sold out, in no uncertain terms, that the women's movement, rather than dealing with nursing as a symptom of the problem of women, all too often accused us as being the cause or the willing participant in all of the depression of women's rights that they perceive to have been occurring all over. And I have felt sold out, in no uncertain terms, by this attitude of the women's movement.
I would go even so far to say that the leaders in the women's movement have been taken in by the very same stereotypic images about nurses that they say are unhealthy about women.
Yes.
There was an article in Ms. Magazine, and I'm sorry I can't remember exactly when the article appeared, but it was super critical of nursing. You read it, June, I know.
We're dealing here, though, with an element of ignorance. You see, let us not blame women for being like we are. There's an element of ignorance. The women writing articles about nursing do not know the facts.
That's right.
They do live by myths, stereotypes, that kind of thing. We've got to correct, because this includes the public, too. Women are a part of the public. We're society. And we do have to overcome this element of ignorance and get our own facts and present these to the public openly. You see, I see health care being a far more serious matter than, let's say, a woman's movement. Women, we must emerge as adults, as humans in a society, and correct, because our very status, poor as it has been, is a health problem. And as I was saying to you earlier, Sandy, women might as well forget it until they liberate the nursing profession and nurses and get their rights straightened out. We'll never see women liberated, because that's an index. The nursing profession is an index of the status of women in a society.
Well, would you agree, we have 15 seconds, I think, or 30 seconds, that education has got to be your top priority?
Yes, positively.
I mean,
Educating the
I'm
public.
not talking about education of nurses, but of the general
Education of
public.
Of the general
Educating
public.
the
Yes.
public.
Oh, yes.
Yes, definitely. The media is going to have to help us do that, too. Because look how we're portrayed on television. We creep around following doctors.
I know, I've seen. Thank you all for being here. We'll all be back next week.
This program was produced by WNED-TV, which is solely responsible for its content. Major funding was provided by public television stations. Additional support was provided by unrestricted general program grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Ford Foundation.